Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Happy to be back with you this week. We've got a great show on tap for you. And beginning the broadcast, we got to start off with the news from the USDA earlier this week. Several major reports came out on Tuesday. Big reductions for corn as the 2020 national corn yield was reduced by 3.8 bushels per acre. You'd have to go back more than 30 years to find a larger drop. In soybeans, the USDA only trimmed the crop by half a bushel per acre, but a tight stocks-to-use ratio continues to contribute to higher commodity prices. Darin Newsom of Darin Newsom Analysis joined me on Wednesday to make sense of the numbers.
I think USDA is making an attempt right now to get back in line with what the corn situation has been for the last 4 years. Because what we've seen is 4 consecutive years, the previous 4 marketing years, of USDA overestimating corn stocks. And over the last 3 to 4 months, we have seen dramatic cuts. I think they've taken over 1 billion bushels off the 2021 ending stocks number. It's just been incredible. Some of the cuts make sense. Some of them some of them could be considered questionable. What it really looks like is it's just a move to try to get back in line with what the market's been telling us for the last 4 years. So that's what I found most interesting yesterday. The slice to last year's yield, the 2020 yield, dropping production by 325 million bushels. They even went back and they reduced last year's ending stocks, the September 1 quarterly stocks number, by another 76 million bushels. So taking 400 million bushels at least off of total supplies. The goal is to try to get back in line. Not that it's a leader, but now it's just trying to get back in line with what the market's been telling us the entire time.
And Darin, let's chat about soybeans for a minute. I'd like to know what you see as the big driver for these markets. I've heard analysts say exports. I've heard analysts say weather in South America. I've heard analysts say the lower dollar. What do you think?
All of the above. It's all the above. We've got a weak U.S. dollar that just can't get its footing underneath it. Now, that usually doesn't make any difference in the soybean market, because when we talk about the dollar, it usually China would buy from whoever had soybeans available. So there were 6 months they bought from South America. Then there were 6 months when they would buy from the United States. However, the U.S. got put on the back burner and was no longer an equal partner in the global soybean trade. And so now market factors like the U.S. dollar are more important. And so with the dollar down, we could be starting to gain some attention from that. But the Brazilian real is also weak, so we're not really gaining much there. The biggest thing is the weather. We saw La Nina, I believe it was La Nina, over South America this winter, which is their summer, which is South American summer. We haven't seen any official reductions to South American production, at least not significantly. We haven't seen any real reductions in local, as far as South American or Brazilian private estimates. So now we just have to wait to see what type of crop, what size of crop Brazil actually produces. Because yes, we've seen extraordinary exports over the first quarter, over the first 4 months of the 2020-21 marketing year. Will they continue? I mean, if Brazil brings in this huge crop, ships are going to stop sailing from the United States, and we're going to see this thing collapse very quick as far as export demand come to a crashing halt very quickly.
Let's circle back on corn. What's going to be the acreage story here?
I think it's going to be a fascinating battle this coming, as we finish off winter and as we head into spring and the planting season, who's going to get the most acres. Right now, both new crop corn and new crop soybeans are saying they need more acres next year. Again, soybeans in particular have an inverted forward curve as far as you want to go out and look. So they're saying that they need more acres. They're probably not going to get them, except for in areas where folks have to plant soybeans versus corn. But corn's still going to get its share of the acres. So we're going to see this battle heating up. Then we have to take into account U.S. weather, where we've got some extremely dry situations, particularly along western Iowa, parts of the U.S. Midwest, certainly the Southern Plains. Is this going to change planting decisions? So I think the next month and a half heading into March is going to be fascinating to watch play out. See, as we get deeper into March and then into April, what actually gets planted. My thought is we're going to still see a lot of corn planted.
And we could be seeing some ripples in the livestock market because of corn too, right?
Yeah, I've been hearing some of that from customers already, that they've put a stop on buying feeder cattle at this point because of the high price of feed. So we saw, during Tuesday's action, we saw feeder cattle get punched around quite a bit. They lost more than $2. Some of it was possibly tied to the corn market, but we also just see, if we've got enough buyers backing off and saying they're not going to buy feeder cattle, replacement feeders, until they come down a little bit, that puts commercial pressure on the market. And so that's what we've been seeing. It looks like feeders want to go down a little bit more. And at that point, we'll see if we start to find some buying interest. We've also seen placement numbers, as I talked about earlier, going down the last couple of months. If that continues, maybe it's the high price of feed, maybe it's the hot cost of feeders and all of these things combined, then we're not going to have the feed demand. Maybe that starts to put a bottom in, and if corn can start to back off, maybe that starts to put a bottom in the feeder cattle market again.
And Darin, with all that we've talked about today, any other marketing or risk management advice that you'd like to leave us with?
It's tough. Risk management's tough in here. My favorite one in this sort of situation is to just sell into this a little bit at a time. We have no idea how high these things are going to go. We have no idea when they're going to stop and turn around abruptly. So, given that, these are all good prices. So if we want to just feed this market a little bit at a time, for those looking to make bigger sales, we could run stops below previous 4-week lows. But let's take, for example, in corn, that's about $1 lower than where we are right now. In soybeans, that's down almost $2 this week. So, we've got to give the market a lot of room if we're long-term bullish. If we just want to feed it in, certainly a situation where that's not going to be all bad.
Next week, we'll be joined by Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners. Moving on, the USDA has been investing funding in rural broadband in states across the country since 2018. Now it's Nebraska's turn. And that's good, because if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's the need for better connectivity. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh tells us more.
When you move into rural areas of the country, you tend to lose internet speed. The USDA is working to change that with the implementation of the ReConnect program.
President Trump had commissioned a Rural Prosperity Task Force, of which Secretary Sonny Perdue chaired that, and it had all the heads of the departments. And as a result of that report, some of the things that were identified, and then one of the key issues is connectivity, and being able to see in rural communities and throughout the nation how important that is for us to have prosperity in our communities.
In 2018, Congress allocated funding for ReConnect, as well as 5 other programs with the same goal. In order to be awarded funding, applicants must meet certain qualifications in a highly competitive field.
The application process, it's a funding opportunity announcement that's open up once a year, in this case, this year and the last year. It's usually open for a period of time, anywhere from 60 to 120 days. And during that time, they're putting together their financials, their design, basically everything that's required to take basically an area that doesn't have a telecommunications or broadband and design and fund and look at all the pro formas for that. And the applicant basically has the ability, likely, it could be any kind of a municipality, county, form of government, depending upon the state rules. Unfortunately, like Nebraska, it may prohibit them from providing that service. So likely the applicants, for the program, at least within Nebraska, is going to be likely a telecommunications company and or someone that's been in that business at least 2 years successfully. The one thing, the build-out requirements for the program itself have to be at least to be able to provide 25 megabytes per second down in speed and 3 megabytes up in speed.
The first Nebraska awards are already planning construction for this year and 2022. As ag production becomes more and more technologically innovative, it's important the connection is present and usable in the community.
And what we're seeing in a lot of different communities on the ag environment is so much more technology is being available. And in ag production, sometimes in rural areas, what's the demand in order for you to extend that service? So there's a challenge with carriers to find out what that is. And some of the terminology that is changing is now looking at, instead of customer density, looking at data density.
In the end, this program will have a lasting impact and help rural communities thrive.
Very excited to get the funds out there, to let the companies that apply for it and successful, to provide the connectivity to those individuals, farmers and ranchers out there.
And it's the people, it's the communities and their can-do attitude to get things done. And this, for me, coming from my background and experience, this is the number one thing that we need in order to compete in a global environment, is to be able to be connected. So it takes a lot of effort from a lot of different people to be successful, and I am excited that as Nebraskans, we're going to get it done.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Thanks, Maddie. Updates for this project can be found at usda.gov/reconnect. Next up, ag researchers and economists are crunching numbers to help give you an idea of the money you'll be putting down this upcoming growing season. The 2021 UNL crop budgets include 83 production budgets for 15 crops, including information on crop budgeting procedures, standard inputs, and a production cost summary. Extension educator Glennis McClure contributed to the 2021 crop budgets and joined me this week to talk about them.
So the 2021 crop budget projections were created, as we have for many, many years. We use assumptions thought to be valid for many producers in Nebraska. However, we realized at the university that each farming operation is unique. And so I think producers can take a look at that list and take a look at those individually and decide what really comes close to sort of matching what their production practices are, and like what they put for inputs, if they do no-till, if they do conventional till, if it's irrigated, dry land, those kinds of things. We try to represent a lot of different cropping practices in Nebraska.
And Glennis, it seems like COVID has just impacted everything one way or another. What kind of impact is that having on crop budgets?
Well, I think the main thing is, as everyone knows, is that we had less demand on fuel and oil, so that has driven down the cost of fuel and oil. And as, again, in agriculture, very dependent on that type of thing. So for our operating costs, when we've decreased the diesel and oil prices that go into our individual budgets. And so that has caused the cash costs of our budgets to decrease. So that affects, again, our operation costs, and it also, fuel and oil sort of drives what's happening on the fertilizer production side of things, and also crop chemicals. And so with those prices down, that's also caused some of those prices to be adjusted a little downward too for 2021.
Where are we seeing some specific increases in costs?
You know, actually, Troy, we did not see huge increases at all because of the significant change in those fuel prices. We, on the cash side of things, we actually are seeing less of a cost per unit or per acre because of, again, those oil prices, chemicals, coming down. So we didn't see increases. I've actually kind of looked back and took a sampling of some of those budgets and see that we have cash costs back to almost the 2018 levels. Now, we did decrease the real estate tax rate just slightly as the legislature has been working on some of those changes with our real estate tax rates. We also made a change, and we did add on overhead costs per acre, $5. So that's been normally running about $20 per acre, and we increased that to $25 because, as you know, expenses like utilities, general farm and liability insurance kind of keep going up, accounting, those kinds of expenses really need to be covered by all of your different crop enterprises.
As one of the researchers on this, did you notice any surprises when you were gathering data for 2021?
A lot of our crop specialists do work on their end in kind of considering what may be changing as far as practices, what kinds of pesticides go into the different operations and so on. And so I thought it was interesting that we decreased, again, and it might be related somewhat to the oil prices, as I mentioned earlier, but we decreased some of the input costs on the chemical side fairly significantly in some cases. We also made some changes to some of those products that are being used. And I understand that there's been more generics developed in that side of things for crop pesticides. And so with generics, we often see a little bit of a lower price. And with that, some of the demand and competition is in the market. So then that really has caused, some other adjustments with some of the sort of the name brands to make some changes.
We've posted a link to this year's report on the Market Journal website. Along with this year's report, you'll also have the option to check out budgets from past years. Next up, the 2020 TAPS competition will see its culmination this weekend as the winning competitors are announced. TAPS, which is short for Testing Ag Performance Solutions, completed another year of successful competition despite the challenges brought on by COVID. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has more.
For anyone who isn't familiar, TAPS, or Testing Ag Performance Solutions, is an educational and experimental agricultural competition that could have enormous benefits for those who are willing to participate. This competition seeks to facilitate and nurture growth of the ag industry by giving participants a virtually risk-free environment to initiate the adoption and creation of new and emerging technologies, methods, and practices through friendly farm management competitions.
It's really a program that facilitates farm management competitions that allows growers access to technology and the ability to try out and test some of their different management practices. And so that is both production as well as marketing. And so the growers can go and select the hybrid that they would like to test against some of their peers as part of the competitions. They might want to try with different technologies on how to manage their inputs, such as water and nitrogen. And then also if they want to play around with some of the different marketing tools out there, such as maybe forward contracts, futures, and so forth. We've been very fortunate. We have an excellent group of partners and sponsors that have really allowed us to have access to a number of technologies. We have sensors that are more in the field to help with irrigation management, and so those are going to be more of soil moisture monitoring, plant sensors. We have edge of field weather stations. We have a whole series of aerial platforms looking at canopy temperature, canopy reflectance, and relating that to maybe nitrogen demand. We have a few different marketing tools and resources to kind of help and allow people to see what's going on in the market, to aid in their decisions. And so it does provide that test bed so that they can do something completely new and to evaluate how that plays out, or if they just want to verify what they've been doing and how that compares to some of their peers.
Through the first few seasons of the TAPS competition, the trajectory of the program had been steadily rising. However, 2020 wasn't any other year. With the growing concern over COVID-19, the competition had its fair share of setbacks, but it's optimistic about the growth and expansion of the program moving forward as other universities regionally are showing increased interest in the TAPS model.
So we were on this really nice trajectory where the first 3 years we've grown in participation, both in grower number as well as partners and sponsors. We were very excited to do some of the in-person events like our tours, our field day, and then most certainly our banquet, which is actually coming up virtually in terms of award announcement. And so because of the COVID pandemic, we weren't allowed to do those, but really surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, but very encouragingly, our growers kind of embraced the situation and continue to engage with us through our Twitter account, tapping into our newsletter, and then that constant communication through email, text message, phone calls. And so although we couldn't do things in person, we really still had a very engaged program for 2020. So TAPS really has grown quite well. So in 2017, as you know, we started with a single location with a single competition in North Platte, Nebraska. And then we've grown in North Platte, but we've also have kind of developed a little bit larger TAPS network with some of our colleagues, both here at UNL as well as other institutions. So for example, in partnership with Jason Warren out of Oklahoma State University and some of his colleagues down there, they're running a similar sprinkler irrigated corn competition and also an irrigated cotton competition in the panhandle of Oklahoma. We have Dr. Cody Creech and Jessica Groskoff out at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center doing a dryland winter wheat competition. And then there's also been a lot of interest of other entities looking at kind of starting up a TAPS-like program because really they want to be able to identify a series of management decisions that's very local and then use that as a way to engage with those growers around that topic.
With the 2020 competition in the books and interest in the program still strong, the TAPS team is already hard at work prepping for 2021 and beyond.
So with 2020 being kind of that challenging year, we are excited in 2021 and a little hopeful that we're going to be able to get back to some level of in-person platform of engagement and interaction. So in North Platte, we're going to continue to have our 3 competitions. We're going to have our sprinkler irrigated corn, our subsurface drip irrigated corn, and we've done a little bit of modification to our sorghum competition. We're actually looking at doing a 2-part where the teams will have both an irrigated as well as a dryland sorghum series of plots to manage. And so some of those details are going to be forthcoming. And then in addition to what we have in North Platte, we're already in the middle of the competition, or I should say Dr. Creech and Jessica Groskoff, they're currently in their 2nd year of the dryland wheat competition out of Sidney, Nebraska. And then also Oklahoma is going to be looking at kind of their next iteration in their 3rd year of the program.
If you happen to be looking to try something different as far as farm management, but want the opportunity to test a new approach, you'll want to keep an eye on what's coming up in future competitions. Participation in TAPS could be a valuable learning experience you won't want to miss. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. If you're interested in seeing this year's winners, the TAPS award ceremony is available to watch virtually on the UNL TAPS Twitter feed or the UNL West Central Research Extension and Education Center's Facebook page. We've also got a link on the Market Journal website. Next up, Brent and Brenda Swoboda raised corn and soybeans near Pender. The experiences they both had in high school being involved in 4-H, FFA, and other organizations led them to seek involvement in farm organizations as a young farm couple. Today, Brent serves as a district director for the Nebraska Soybean Association. He encourages other young families to get involved in commodity groups, farm organizations, and civic efforts. You can read about their advice for young farmers in the January Nebraska Farmer. We're going to end things today with a look at our forecast. Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher is here in studio. Al, hasn't felt too bad out there for a week in January. What can we expect for the days ahead?
Well, Troy, we did see some very nice conditions earlier in the week, and unfortunately we've seen the very cold air start to move in as a very strong system moved into the northern plains, and that originated out in the Gulf of Alaska, and that energy come over top of the Rocky Mountains and exploded as it got into the our central plains, and we've seen the very strong winds. I would consider Thursday more of a 1 hairspray can day, and definitely yesterday was a 2 hair can spray day, and I don't even know if that would have been enough to keep the hair in place with the amount of wind we've seen, and unfortunately some very significant blowing and drifting snow, particularly across extreme eastern Nebraska and most of Iowa. We do see a little bit of a break here over this next week, but another pending storm system later next week needs to be watched very carefully for the potential for once again to see some significant accumulating snows across the central plains. So as we go to the upper air models, basically here is the low that came through. So during this last couple days, we have another wave that is coming down from this northerly flow, and it is expected to strengthen rapidly as it moves to the east of us. Low pressure over western Kansas basically will allow some moisture return, but the main system to the east of us is robbing a lot of that moisture. So we're going to be dealing with more clouds, but you can see as we get into tomorrow, that system really starts to strengthen as it gets over Illinois and eastern Iowa. We have cold high pressure moving in behind us, so we're going to be rather cool, more seasonable basically in the 30s this weekend, but we won't have to deal with the heavy fog like we did last weekend. Not looking much in the way of precipitation. Now we get a little bit of a break on Monday as another trough starts to approach us from the northwest. That's going to allow some warm air to move into the region, so we should maybe rebound back at the upper 30s to the mid 40s as low pressure takes shape over eastern South Dakota at the surface. See some precipitation in the form of snowfall to the west of us, and then some of that energy drops to the southwest of us, and the main cold air moves to the east. So we're going to be caught between these systems. So high pressure will be weak high pressure firmly in control over our region. There may be a scattering of flurry activity, but the most significant precipitation will remain to our south. Now, as we get into the day on Wednesday, we'll see some of that energy trying to move toward the northeast from that low in the southwest, and then the northern stream will start to try to push some colder into our region. Low pressure sets up in southwestern portions of Kansas, starts to lift moisture out into eastern Texas, and that will only increase as the week progresses. So the northern stream energy moves over to the Great Lakes. That low starts to make its way toward western Texas. Start to see surface low development on Thursday over the Texas Panhandle and south central Oklahoma. That will start to lift moisture up into the region. We'll start to see some pretty significant snowfall off the southern Rockies, and some of that pushing up into northern Kansas, southern Nebraska, particularly as we get into the day on Friday, as the system itself really starts to dig a very deep trough and gets very well organized with low pressure over the Great Basin. That's going to lead to some significant moisture across the Central Plains. This is likely to change as we can progress into the future, but be aware that a very potent system may develop as we get to the end of next week. And more of it will be in store as we get into the following week. 8 to 14-day forecast indicates from next Thursday to the following Tuesday that cold air will rush in. We'll start to see many systems moving through the central and southern plains, and in terms of precipitation, with a troughiness and all those waves moving through, expect above normal moisture, especially if that system itself develops. So Troy, overall, looks like calm weather until we get into next weekend.
Thanks, Al. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.